Hello.
Hello.
Welcome to Coffee Class number 15. I know that the intro said with John Warren, but we need to change that to with young screenwriters, because today there is no John Warren. So you have us three today. John is on a trip, but we're gonna do Inception, which is super duper fun. And yeah, we're gonna get into it. Adam's gonna break it down. Adam's gonna do the John breakdown today, and then, like always, we'll open it up to a conversation and whatever questions you've got. So,
sounds good.
Let's do it.
All right, so I'm going to do a super quick breakdown of the major plot points and so this basic structure of Inception. Such a good movie. The thing I have to say off the bat is, at its core, this film works as a heist film, and it's a very simple heist film about one man who wants to get his children back. And that's the objective from the moment we learn about it till the last scene of the movie. And I think that's what works really well about this movie. While there's as much complicated world building, as complicated as the actual job is, and all of the players that they had to get together to like pull off the heist, it's still in every moment about one man trying to overcome the guilt of the past so he can see his children in the future. Now, Inception opens with the beach shot of Cobb washed up on the ocean. We don't understand why or where he is, but very quickly he's drawn into some sort of military installation, a castle, where he sees this old man who we learn later is Saito, but in the moment we don't understand where he is, and they make a reference to an arrangement that this old man has made an arrangement with Cobb. But we cut right from that moment to sometime in the past in the same castle, in the same place, with Cobb talking to a younger version of this old man. And we very quickly learn that this is them trying to pitch themselves as a protection for him in what we learn later is the dream world. They want to be to protect him from extraction, which is the basic principle of people who steal ideas from your subconscious. And quickly we learn through a sequence that the guy doesn't believe them, or he believes that he's already being conned by them, so he doesn't really trust them, and he doesn't really want to engage in a deal with them. We learn that this is a dream within a dream, and from that point, it's a dream. They're really on a train. They were in a castle. They're in an apartment, but they're really in a train. And in this sequence, we learn a bunch of things. We learn in the first 15 minutes of this movie all of the essential rules of this world. We learn that if you're in a dream and you get shot, you wake up. We learn that to wake somebody up, you do something called a kick, which is to mess up their sense of gravity. We learn, that this woman, Ma, is somehow not to be trusted. We learn that she has some significance in a past relationship to Cobb. We learn that the details matter when you're constructing a dream. When you're an architect, for example, the polyester rug that Saito finds his face on in the second level of the dream, that lack of detail, the fact that the architect got the wrong texture of the rug, was enough for him to know that he was dreaming, and he was still dreaming. Anyway, none of this really matters. What matters is that they've established the basic rules of what can happen in this dream world, who these people are, and the types of jobs they're trying to do. They're trying to extract information from a safe, which is the subconscious. Anyway, but what we really learn in the first 15 minutes, we learn that Cobb is a man who is persecuted by the law. We learn that he wants to see his children again, that he can't see his children because he's persecuted by the law. We learn that in his normal world, in his normal life, he's persecuted and he's he can't see his family. We learn that we learn a lot of the little ties to, we don't necessarily understand what his inner need is. We don't necessarily understand what his flaw is yet, but we do very soon. The threads of it are shown. When we first meet the antagonist, Ma, his wife. She mentions, you're putting them out of order. Sorry, I'm just going. Ma, his wife, who we learn later is a subconscious representation of his wife. She's not actually him because she's dead. But anyway, we learn a lot of we learn all of the essential ingredients about who he is and what the rules of the world are and what is possible in this. Anyway, the job fails. They find themselves on the train. The guy Saito knew he was in a dream, and we quickly cut to after the job and the phone call the Cobb takes on with his children. This is where we learn more about Cobb. About 17 minutes into the movie, after we've gone through an entire sequence, we learn all of the rules of who he is and the world he lives in and what is possible in the dreamscape. We see him really for what he is. He's a father who can't get in touch with his children, and he has ghosts from the past. We're just going really quickly through these objectives. From this moment, we know his objective is to find his children. Very quickly after this, Saito, the man who they were trying to con, he offers them a job. He offers them a job of Inception. Now, this is the inciting incident. The inciting incident being the life-changing event that will set the course of the entire movie. Cobb, this is life-changing because this is a huge deal. Arthur, Joseph Gordon-Levitt, is quick to say, "Oh, Inception's impossible. It can never be done." Cobb says, "Well, I have achieved Inception before." But the key thing is, this is a way for him to get to his children again. This is a job that, even if it's difficult, even if it's incredibly impossible, Cobb if this job can enable him to get his charges dropped in America, he'll take it, and he will take the plunge, even if he has to be dishonest with his team, even if he has to bite off more than he can chew. This guy will do anything to get his objective of seeing his children again. So that's taking on this job, even if Inception is difficult. It's something he's interested in doing. And while there's a quick moment where, he says, "Oh no, it's not possible," he has his response to the inciting incident. Very quickly and artfully, he's brought on board to the adventure. He says, "Yes, I'm going to go and I'm going to do this job." And very quickly, we're only about 20 minutes into the movie, and this is a very short act one. But by jumping off from this point, we take on all of the inherent tropes, not all of the inherent tropes, but we take on the inherent tropes of a heist movie. And you can't have a heist movie without having the first part of your second act being about getting the gang together, getting a team of specialists. In this case, this means getting a thief, a forger, and an architect. The most important being an architect, Ariadne, which is Ellen Page. The important function. Yusuf, Eames, and Ariadne. Ariadne Cobb needs Ariadne because he can't make dreams anymore. His flaw is that he can't let go of the past. He can't let go of the guilt of his wife's murder. And that manifests as the antagonist. Ma literally is the personification of his dead wife and the guilt of the crime, not crimes, but what he did to her, that will get in the way of the mission. He can't trust himself to design the levels of the dream, so he needs an architect who isn't him. And Ariadne also takes on the role of the mentor in the story. She teaches Cobb lessons. She is the key focal point for the audience's perspective. She's the new person in this world. She doesn't know the rules of the world, and neither does the audience. And so the audience learns all of the information and exposition of the film through Ariadne's eyes. But more than that, she's the mentor to Cobb. She teaches him or helps him let go of his wife's guilt. She helps him overcome his dramatic flaw. But in the second act, a lot of obstacles come up. Cobalt Engineering, their previous employer for the job against Saito, is still after them. And when they go to Mombasa to get Eames and Yusuf, the other team members, the forger and the the person who's going to get them the higher sedatives to go multiple levels into the dream. The obstacles of this part of the story are setting up the job, the logistical challenges of setting up the job, and Cobalt Engineering getting in the way of the chase scene in Mombasa, them trying to brainstorm about, okay, how do we get into I keep forgetting his name. Fisher's head. Robert Fisher is the son of a major energies company. He's the heir, and when his father dies, he's going to become the heir apparent. Saito's job, back to the Inciting Incident. The Inciting Incident specifically is to plant Inception into Robert Fisher's mind to get him to break up his father's, this isn't the objective. Sorry, to get him to break up his father's.
Not?
No, the objective is to get back to his kids.
Okay, I thought that. Okay.
Really?
Well,
that was for
we
me.
have a full conversation later,
right, well,
but
we'll talk about that in a minute. But
you go ahead. I got you.
I've got opinions as well.
What is it, Avi?
I've got opinions on this as well.
All right. Well, we can talk about that in a minute. Let me just really go through this because
you got it.
There's a lot of information. So anyway, building in a heist movie, building the team together, sort of troubleshooting the difficulty of what it will make up the big job, the big con, are all these objectives that get in the way. And obviously, Cobalt Engineering wants Cobb dead because they paid him to heist Saito in the field. Yes, that is. So Cobalt Engineering is trying to prevent them from. Well, they want to get their hands on them for failing the job. But anyway, after the most important thing I think for this first half of the second act is that Ariadne is trying to, as she's learning more about Cobb and more about this world, she learns more and more about Cobb's weaknesses. When Cobb is teaching her about like the rules of constructing dreams and what this is like, Ma, his subconscious, Ma shows up. Ma keeps breaking things. Ma keeps creating conflict and making this an uncomfortable experience for Ariadne. When the key scene for me is when she breaks into Cobb's subconscious when he's dreaming, and she realizes that he's trying to repress Ma by locking her away into memories. This is a key point for me because it's this act of repression isn't really addressing. It's Cobb not really addressing his flaw. It's sort of like a stopgap, a really ineffective way of achieving this goal. So it obviously isn't going to work, and it's obviously Ariadne has this great line, like she's bursting out of the seat, like you can't contain her. She's going to get out. You're going to endanger my life if I go on this job. You're going to Arthur needs. If I don't come along with you, at least Arthur needs to know. You need to tell somebody because this is not going to be dangerous. And it obviously proves to be the case. But the what's key about the fact of him locking her up in memories, in my opinion, is that he's trying to address his flaw in the wrong way, rather than like achieving catharsis in a meaningful way by letting go of Ma. He's making the problem worse temporarily anyway. So they get all of the pieces ready for the heist, and they get on the plane. They're ready to get Robert Fisher They've decided that they're going to plant an idea in his head that's simple, that's tied to his father, and even though it can be difficult to implant an idea that's like more political, they make it personal by picking an idea of, I do not want to be my father. My father wants me to build something instead. They get on the plane, they go to the job. Everything's going just fine. Boom, a freight train goes through the middle of the street. Ma, Ma as an aspect of his subconscious is breaking at the seams and ruining the job. Saito gets shot. It turns out that Robert Fisher's subconscious was all actually trained, and they all have machine guns. Everything's going to hell. They are committed to the job, and they find out that, wait, the sedative we used is too intense. If somebody gets shot, they're going to get stuck in limbo, unconstructed dream space, and never comes back. This is significant because Saito, who was just shot, is dying. If Saito dies, Cobb is never going to see his children again. He needs Saito alive at the end of this job to make that phone call to get his charges clear. So immediately the stakes are raised, and everything has gone to hell. Everything we knew about going to this job is incredibly difficult. We have the ticking bomb of Saito is going to die. They have to succeed. They can't wait around because Fisher's subconscious will kill them all if they don't. And if they all die, they're going to get stuck in limbo. They have to move forward and they have to succeed on the job, or else everything's going to go to shit. So we go into the next set of the second half of Act 2, where we have a lot more logistical challenges and obstacles. They try to trick Fisher into thinking that they're on his side, that they're manifestations of his subconscious, to get him to fight against his own subconscious. In a move called Mr. Charles. They go 3 levels deep, and all through this sequence, there are ticking bombs. We get to the point where there's a falling truck, the Joseph Gordon-Levitt getting shot at and strangled, and at the 3rd level, the deepest part of the dream, they're trying to get Robert Fisher catharsis before Saito dies. So many things are going on, and every element is ramping up the suspense, is ramping up the intensity. There are so many ticking clocks going on. It's very intense. And more importantly, we're at the point of the film, once we reach the midpoint, we've stopped really giving exposition. This is all payoff. It's all payoff on things we've been taught to understand earlier in the setup of the movie, and it's really well done. Just one second. And as we go through all of these obstacles, we reach a critical moment, all is lost moment, which Saito dies, and more importantly, Robert Fisher gets shot by Ma, the antagonist. At this point, the job is done. They're basically screwed. Like if Robert Fisher having his catharsis was the only way they were going to succeed, and him being shot by Cobb's subconscious ruins everything. And in order to succeed, they have to go into unconstructed dream space, which is this crazy place where 50 years can pass in like a day. Time is very unconstricted there. The stakes are really high there. Ma is more dangerous there because she's closer, and there's no assurance of ever being able to come back from that. But they go anyway. And the most critical part of the film, the ultimate test, Cobb confronts Ma, and he lets go of her. He lets go of his guilt over planting the idea of Inception in her, which is something that's revealed throughout that time. He was the one who gave her the idea that her world is not real. And his guilt around that is literally what's been torturing him and causing him to, be psychologically unstable in this world. But he needs to let go of her. And he has this great line where, we already grew old together. We already had our time. And he lets go of her, and he's able to save Robert Fisher. And the job might have been successful, but Cobb still has to save Saito, who's somewhere in limbo. There's no chance of him getting him back conventionally, but he has to get him back in order for him to make that phone call and get his charges cleared. So we go all the way back to that first scene of Cobb washing up on the beach and talking to Saito as an old man. God knows how much time has passed, but because time's relative in limbo. And they have this great moment where we can be we can be young men together again. And that works as the rebirth, the final fight. And after they save Saito, the job is successful. You see them have their rebirth on the airplane. Everyone succeeded on the job. And finally, the resolution of the film, Cobb gets what he wants. He gets back with his children. Of course, we leave on that wonderful ambiguous note of the top spinning forever. But those are the big points of the film. I rushed over a lot, but I want us to go into, I want everybody to start talking about this and address questions. Tell me what I missed. So Alexie, you think the objective is, now that I think about it, that makes sense because it's tangible, getting Robert Fisher to have his arc. And I also think there's a great point. There's kind of a meta narrative here where the goal of the film is to give somebody an arc, to get him to connect with himself on a level. There's a really nice thread there.
I mean, there is a scene where this crew, that's basically a film crew, are sitting around in a circle trying to figure out how to make a corporate product connect emotionally. I mean, I think Nolan was making a movie about movies, about making movies to a degree. But anyway, objective.
Yeah. I mean, I think that my understanding of it was that his inner need was to connect with his family. And then his flaw was like obviously his guilt about like basically killing his wife. And then his objective was just like planting that idea. And they were able to make it tangible by like talking about like safes and stuff, like putting it in that safe made it more clear when it had happened, was my thought.
Yeah, I mostly agree. I think his flaw is that he refuses to confront his guilt, and he's more willing to kind of shove it aside, but it's going to burst through no matter what. So his inner need is to confront his guilt and actually like work through it. I think his tangible goal is to implant this idea in Robert Fisher and fulfill this heist, and the motivation is he wants to get back to his children. And I think there's something to be said for motivation that is so strong and so specific that it could be like considered a goal in itself. Where
so I have a question. So
yeah.
if for me, the reason I thought it was his children was because of where it was planted in the film at the end of the first act. And like we don't really know about Robert Fisher or really anything really even really specifically about the inciting incident. He does tell him we want him to build up. Right. I'm talking myself out of it.
I mean, my feeling is they're on the helicopter, right? And Saito says, "I want to plant this idea in my business rival that he should destroy his empire, and I want you to do that for me. And that's going to be a really hard job." And Cobb says no, and Saito says, "If you do this, you can be with your family again." And then Cobb says yes. And the way I see it, the goal is to do this job and to do it correctly. And there's really no other way to get past that. And if he succeeds, then he gets something that really matters to him. And that, I think, is motivation. That's the stakes for him. The stakes are his children. If he wins, he gets them. If he fails, then not only will he never see them again, but he'll be arrested as soon as they land.
Right.
So I'd call them motivation.
So here we go. I asked everybody what they think the objective is. We're getting a lot of people agreeing with Adam. And wait, so Avi, is your opinion that the objective is the kids?
No, I think it's the motivation.
So I think there isn't a definitive answer to this, because this isn't really like a technical thing, because at the end of the day, it's related. Like Robert Fisher is the way for him to get his kids.
It's sort of like how when I was interpreting Winter's Bone, I thought the objective was to save the house, not necessarily get the dad. And John was like, "No, it's the dad." So it's like one. They're so connected that.
So let me make an argument for it being the kids. The whole reason getting Saito for me is what about the kids, because he has to save Saito in the final fight after they saved Robert Fisher. Because, like, do you know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
Well, I mean, so here's what I'd argue against that.
Please.
What's the log line of the movie? It is about a protagonist who must fulfill this really impossible heist. And if I'm Nolan, I'm thinking, how do I make the audience care about that? And he decided to make it the kids. It could have been something else. Like, if he could have come up with another reason why he has to do the heist, but ultimately the heist is the thing that has to be done. And I'd actually argue that the final fight is his confrontation with Maul, personally, and that.
Then what was the choice to go back and confront?
Well, I think that's part of that same fight. The choice, because he says, "I'm going to stay behind here," and there's a moment of, is he choosing to give in to his guilt and to succumb to it? And he says, "But I'm staying here not for you, but for Saito, who will get me out of this and move me forward in life away from this." And that's the choice. And then everything after that is just sort of going through with the choice. But the choice is made in that moment, I think.
That's a fair argument. What would you say the ultimate test was then?
The ultimate test, I think the ultimate test is when Maul is essentially convincing him, right? When he's there, Mal has.
You mean it's
Fisher.
all so it's all the same sequence?
I
right?
think it's all the same sequence. I think Mal is there, basically tempting him, right? And she's making a good argument why maybe his real life is fake. She's saying, like, all the you're persecuted on a daily basis. Like, how do you know that's not the same as being in a dream? She's making a very strong case. He's laid himself bare for Ariadne, and basically she puts it all in his hands. And that's, I think, the test. And the fight is when he makes the choice. She stabs him, Ariadne shoots her. Great, we're moving forward. And I think at that point, the ending of the movie's a given. I think at that point, all the choices are made.
I think so. My understanding of the ultimate test I've found out is a little bit different than I've always considered it. The moment when the protagonist comes up against the antagonist and initially loses because they haven't corrected their flaw yet. So in my mind, the ultimate test would be
when he didn't shoot her.
Well, yeah, like when he didn't shoot her.
Yeah.
And it looks like she's gonna, like, everything's screwed. They're gonna have to leave. They didn't get Fisher or whoever is dead. They're not gonna get his idea planted. And then there's the all is lost. And then he corrects his flaw and does the scene that Avi was talking about.
Right. So I think from a definitional standpoint, I don't call that the final test. I think we might have different definitions of that phrase, because for me, the final test is at the very end when the protagonist has no choice but to make the choice that will define the rest of the film. And, once that choice is made, the arc is either, completed for, positively or negatively. And I think that the final test is when he makes the choice to move on from Mal.
That's what I call the final fight. And then
gotcha.
See, we're basically these are just semantics, because at the end of the day, the same function is being fulfilled.
Yeah. I think we agree. It's just what we're calling it for the most part.
And I love that the all is lost moment is triggered by his flaw.
Yeah.
It's not an external thing. It really is because he can't shoot. All is lost. And there's something to be said for that.
Let's see. I thought that, let's see. Someone pointed out earlier that I'd never made this connection, but Tom Hardy being the forger, with meaning that he just put on other people's faces. I don't know why. I've seen this movie 17 times, and I've never made the connection that by forging they mean other people.
He's taking on Browning's space, because remember he was examining like his mannerisms.
Gosh.
Well, he's the actor, and Ariadne's the production designer, and I think Arthur's the screenwriter, and Cobb is the director, and I don't know, Yusuf's the grip. Saito's the executive producer.
That's great.
And Fisher's the audience.
I think it was an interesting choice because, if Christopher Nolan had this idea, like, okay, I want to have a movie where they're trying to plant an idea in someone's mind. The choice of making that person Fisher is so, and like making it a positive thing, like. Fisher isn't a bad guy. I just thought that was so interesting. I thought a different filmmaker would have been like, I'm going to plant in this bad guy's mind not to kill a bunch of people. Like, it was interesting that
it's saving the cat in a way. I know we would save the cat here, but it is kind of saving the cat in that, like, okay, we have this, we have these people who are essentially going into somebody's brain, manipulating them into doing something that is against their interests for the sake of another company to become a monopoly and take over the world. Like, that's kind of evil. But in the process, we're going to resolve all of this person's inner problems and essentially be his therapists and make his life better. Like, it's such a specific choice to decide that their mark has to be improved by all this.
It was, and they said that specifically. They were like, Fisher should be paying us.
Yeah. Because I feel like if it's a villain who they're implanting in his head, it kind of becomes a cruel, vindictive sort of a thing in a way.
Yeah. So let's see. Okay, Carrie asks, do the inner need and flaw not have to relate to the objective at all? I felt like the objective was kids, but then what he actually got was a resolution to his flaw with resolving his guilt. My take on objective is that it's not necessarily it's not necessarily exactly their flaw or inner need, but it's you make the objective something that will put obstacles between your protagonist and it that will specifically challenge the flaw. So if that makes any sense. So it's not that the objective itself is related to the flaw, but it's you chose it because you can put stuff like leading up to it that will challenge the flaw.
Yeah, pretty much. I mean, as far as I'm concerned, like inner flaw and inner need are, they're two sides of the same coin. Like if the flaw is that you can't move on, then your need is to move on, and it has to relate to the objective in the sense that the flaw has to make it difficult to obtain that objective. So in this case, his flaw is literally come to life and is actively sabotaging him every step of the way, which is, not subtle, but it's true. Like if you have an inner flaw and an inner need that don't really make it difficult to pursue the objective, then you have the wrong objective or you have the wrong inner flaw and inner need.
Mm-hmm.
Also, we have to talk about. I don't know. I'm going back and forth between whether or not like the objective is the kids, because the final moment is kind of like whether or not he made the right choice and like he chose to stay down with her or not. Is sort of like, well, is he still in limbo and is he just dreaming about having his kids back? That's kind of like a choice in and of itself, right? Like it's presented at the end. It's presented like, oh my God, maybe he's still dreaming.
I don't like that choice that they left that top like ambiguous. I'm like,
I mean, I don't know. It is a question of sort of like, where was that choice planted to make them make the decision to like leave, or was it just really arbitrary?
So I remember Nolan said something about it, and I might be misremembering, but he said something along the lines of, because over the course of the movie, he really is plagued by these feelings of, what is real, what isn't real, and feeling guilt about, creating planting an idea that forced somebody to deny reality, that at the very end, there is a question of whether or not reality is real, and it doesn't matter, that he is happy regardless. And that he saw that as a way to, explore the arc, where at the end of the film, he is not concerned by the fact it might not be real. He's just going to accept the life that's there. Because remember at the beginning of the movie, he's unwilling in the dreams to look at his children's faces, right? And at the very end, the children look at him and we see the faces. And I think by making it ambiguous as to whether or not it's a dream, they're saying, well, if it is a dream, then he has changed.
Right. And I personally am of the opinion that he is still dreaming, because the kids are wearing they're wearing the exact same clothes.
Oh,
and
wait,
the same
the little
lighting.
boy has that dorky haircut still.
Yeah,
I noticed
the same
that.
age.
But there is a
age.
change. There is a change.
What is it?
Michael Caine's character?
No, Cobb is no longer wearing a wedding ring. He wears it in all the dreams. He does not wear it in the last scene.
Wait, because some people have the theory that that's really his totem, that it wasn't the top.
I've seen that. I've seen that theory. I don't know if that was intentional or not. I choose to see it as
he gave
ambiguous.
up on his life.
I choose to see it as ambiguous. I mean, I feel like there's something to be said for there might not actually be an answer. What really matters is if we're leaving it open, why are we leaving it open? And to me, it's because it shows that he has changed because...
Right, I agree with that, the fact that if it is a dream, he still made the change and he still made a choice to let go of his wife, or the guilt surrounding that. But like, what about the kick? Because they missed the kick to get out. Like, how did they get out of limbo in the end, right? Like, this is
a new conversation, and I have a thought about this, because there are so many rules in this movie, and it spends a lot of time expositing about the rules. And I think we should have a whole conversation about exposition, because they have a very interesting way of doing that in this film. There is a point, I think, in a movie where if it has enough rules that are kind of explained to you and your attention is drawn to them, that when something slips up about the rules, we notice. And I think there are some inconsistencies in the rules in the third act that we probably wouldn't have cared so much about if they didn't spend so much time shining a light on them. Like the idea of, in theory, the kick should be in the level above. That wakes you up from the level below. So why does going to the level below and having a kick send you back up? I don't understand that. And I think I wouldn't have cared if they didn't keep telling us.
Right. I definitely think I think the logic of the film, that's a weak point.
I mean, I'm sort of like, it's kind of like in a horror, right? That sort of operates in a more emotional sphere, and it's okay if the logic doesn't always connect, because what really matters is how you feel. And I think a movie like this that is about dreams and dream logic could have gone that route. And because Nolan is Nolan, he really wanted to make sure everything is clockwork and perfect. And you can't really obtain perfect. And I feel like there are just flaws in logic that were bound to happen in order to tell a story. So that's...
Wait. Sorry. I comment just triggered my answer. It's the gun. They shoot each other because the sedation wore off.
What?
Because he has a gun.
Oh,
at the end, in the final fight, sorry, not the final fight, but like with Saito.
Yeah. Well, that's how. I mean, that's presumably how they get out of it. And then they go out of their way not to show that moment. Something
I don't get is they spent all this time telling us that if you get stuck in like the lowest level, whatever the F it is, unstructured, whatever, then you're screwed for life and you're gonna melt your brain and everything sucks. But then he and his wife were in there forever, right?
But it did mess with her.
But they could have left at any time because they leave when they decide to kill themselves. So are you really even stuck there if they were able to just like decide to kill themselves with a train and leave?
I saw it as they were forgetful in the, like when Cobb and Mal went there, they had full intention behind it and they were essentially lucid for it. And when we see Saito and Cobb there at the end, they're both struggling to remember where they are and where they've been. It's actually kind of funny. It's the same scene as the opening scene, but I think they change who says what lines.
Oh.
I think that in the opening scene, Saito says all of the lines and says half-remembered dream and all that. And I think at the last scene, Cobb is saying that, and he looks like he's vaguely remembering something being said. I don't know. I think that's getting in the weeds a bit, but it's... I think they're trying to set up the idea that it really depends on if you can force yourself to remember.
So what I think is really important to talk about, getting back on track, is the use of exposition in the movie and the way they teach the rules and the way they pay off on those rules and subvert certain things, like teaching us early in the film that if you get shot, you wake up and you go to the next level of the dream, and then later on changing that rule by saying, actually, we have a sedative, you're fucked. Like having the audience have an understanding and then that understanding changing via conflict in the new situation. And also just like the multiple levels of the kicks working all together dramatically, just so well done in terms of like planting information early.
I think that there's in terms of, applying this to your own story, Ellen Page's character does what we do a lot of times in worlds that involve a lot of world building and a lot of rule construction, is you create a character who's new to it so that you get to experience the world through their eyes and have your questions answered. And that's just something that, people like Harry Potter had never knew magic was real.
Right.
And so then we get to go into that world and learn it with him rather than just being dropped in to the middle of a world where we're expected to already know everything. It's just, I just wanted to point that out, that was,
100%.
Yeah.
And it's also worth pointing out, you have Ariadne there to be exposited to because she is new, and they create the idea that they lost their architect and must get a new architect so that there could be someone to talk to. When the rules that were already established change, like when when Cobb says, actually, you can't just shoot your way out of this, you'll die, then you can have them talk about it amongst characters who do know the rules. So he's telling Ellen Page all of the things that everybody else knows, and as soon as something changes that nobody knows about, then they talk about it with everybody but her, oddly enough. It's funny, kind of like talking about exposition. I watched the Aaron Sorkin masterclass a while back, and he was talking about how do you do exposition, and his way of doing it is have a character who doesn't know and just have somebody explain it, and that's what they do in this film. And there's sort of a tightrope there, because then you have to make sure the character actually is justified as a character too.
The way I think they fix that is making Ariadne very skeptical of Cobb and his relationship with Mal. Like when she goes in to where he was hiding all the memories of her, that scene I think is the key scene that makes her active. Like she chose to, sort of jump into his dreams and to like go down the elevator to the bottom level to see, like she was active that way.
She's the mentor. She's the mentor.
It was
her job is
it was just an interesting choice to make the character who's the newest be the mentor.
Yeah.
Yes. Yes, that was cool.
Yeah. And I think that's how they get away with it, I think. With justifying bringing someone completely new into the hardest job that they ever are going to pull is,
right.
You know, that she's very smart.
And I think if they had just had her as, you're the new character, you're going to get the exposition, and then don't have her constantly engaging with Cobb's flaw and sort of playing therapist with him, then it would have felt blatant, I think.
Yeah.
And we would have felt like we were being talked to. And the exposition in the other sequences where it's like, no, don't shoot him, he'll die. I think one of the best ways to give exposition in a script when you don't have an opportunity to just explain it is to couch it in conflict, right?
Yeah.
So it's not just, hey guys, FYI, when we're in there, you can't shoot yourself to escape because then you'll die. It's, I can't believe that you didn't tell us this before. Now we're trapped in here. That's irresponsible. How dare you? You've manipulated us. Like it's all, in there, and that makes the exposition go down, spoonful of sugar.
So what did you guys think about the motif, the use of motif, like special lines, recurring lines that were like associated with emotion and characters? I thought that was so well done in this movie. Like you have to take a leap of faith. There's a train, you don't know where it's going to take you, or like, do you want to be young men? We can grow. No, it won't be old men filled with regret. It could be young men together again. Like there are all these like lines tied to the arcs of the characters that are all set up early and all pay off really. Like I love that use of motif. What do you guys think about that?
It was like less on the forefront of my mind because I tend to get very caught up in the sci-fi of it. I was mentioning this in the Discord, but I feel like this was the first like smart movie I ever saw when it came out 10 years ago. Like it was like the first like adult movie that I saw, and I felt so smart when I left the theater just for having followed it. But so I still kind of get caught up in figuring out how they set up the sci-fi of it and how they explain the rules every time.
It trusts the audience.
Yeah.
My thought about the recurring things is I think it's actually a really worthwhile thing to discuss for screenwriters, people learning to be screenwriters, because I think it's Chekhov's gun in the best way possible. Yes. Because everybody kind of takes Chekhov's gun, which is, if there's a gun on the mantle in the first act, it has to go off in the last act. A lot of people, I think, take that to mean if there's a threat, you have to fulfill the threat. If there's a promise, you have to fulfill the promise. And that's all true. Like there is the promise of you can't go to limbo, it'll be hell. And then, of course, they have to go to limbo. It's very important. Right. But there's something also to be said of an element in a story must return. Every small element in a story must return. So it's worth thinking, if you're writing a script, if you have a line that you write in Act 1 or just an element you write in Act 1, think about how you can bring it back later, and then it becomes a motif. And then if you have something that happens in the last act and it's not set up, figure out how could I plant that earlier as well. Because even small things like lines, or also what I love that Nolan does in this film and in a lot of his films is those really quick silent cuts to single shots that represent that are just excerpts of other scenes that we're going to get to, like when when Cobb turns and he sees that billowing curtain, and then every so often we see the curtain and then we realize what the curtain represents, or the broken glass, or the children who are playing in that very specific pose. It makes it so much more satisfying when you actually get to that moment of what it means. And also, if there's something that's set up early that means a lot in the moment, the more it comes back, the more weight it sort of snowballs. So always think about how can you bring back things that you've planted, even if you didn't mean for it to be a setup.
It's kind of like, it's John's line, no arbitrary choices in a screenplay.
Yes.
It's like the hearing aid in Quiet Place.
Yeah, right.
Everything.
And I think that's, Adam, this reminds me of when you talked about cliche and, just narrative devices and things. It's that when you do things like that, when you bring things back later, when you set things up and then actually deliver on it consistently throughout the movie, not just like in one way, you gain the audience's trust and respect. And you also show that you respect them as an audience member, and you make them feel smart. Like I felt smart when I was watching Inception. So I was like, oh, they didn't tell me that was connected, but I noticed those curtains.
The audience likes to figure things out.
Yeah, and it's
Yes.
about like trusting them that they will, and it's hard to know what the how specific you have to be.
And just on a writing level, in terms of like finding out what those payoffs are going to be to the things you're setting up, like what are these unused elements? Like, I think it's so important to consider like depth versus complexity. Like, take a look at the elements you've already created and brainstorm, like, how can you develop them? Like, what are potential payoffs for like elements of your world and story, like who these people are, the things they do, the habits, the lines you have. How can you think of payoffs? Like, think about things in terms of, like, if you have elements, how can you develop deeper? Because if you just add new elements to create tension or create obstacles, sometimes that's cheaper than twisting what you already have and adding new dimension to what you already have, going deeper as opposed to just adding new elements.
Also, kind of getting back to the children and the whole objective motivation thing, I think there's something to be said for making every element of your script, to the best of your abilities, really specific and visual. So, like, they could have had the motif. Like, just think about the motivation, right? Like, why does he want to fulfill this heist? It could have just been a vague, well, you'll be rich, or we'll let you return to society, that your crimes will be cleared. And Nolan was smart enough to say, how can I turn that into a picture? Right? And the picture is the kids. And it's the same thing with everything else. How do I show that they have doubts about where they are? Okay, we'll have the totem, making it an image. And if you make that image recur, we start to see kind of connections between those things, between the things and the characters, and wherever the characters are on their journey, that thing kind of reflects where they are in their arc in a way, because they will interact with it in a different way, just by virtue of being in the same spot at the same time.
And I have to think about, another heist movie, Ocean's 11. Like, it's not just the money. He wants the relationship with Julia Roberts, and more specifically, he wants to screw over the guy who owns the hotel so he can have the relationship. Like, it's about personal element. It's not just about some sort of cheap,
and that's
stuff.
a picture also.
Yeah,
Julia Roberts.
Yeah.
That's something that John brought up to me when I was working on an objective for my script, and it used to always confuse me so much. It's such a frustrating note to get before it makes sense, but it's, why does it have to be them?
Right.
Why does your protagonist have to be the person to do this? Why can't it be someone else? And before you figure out the answer, that's so annoying to get that note, because you're just like, because they have to. But
this person.
Yeah, because they're there. They're the one who's asked to do it. It's like, no, you need a reason why they emotionally must be the one to do it.
Yeah.
And
also, why now?
Yeah, and why now?
This is why I love David Lynch movies, because there is no reason. Like there's no reason, there's no motivation. I just watched Mulholland Drive last week, and I was like, there's no reason for any of this to be happening.
David
and that's so wonderful.
David Lynch movies are a break. They're a break.
I know, they're wonderful. I love it. I just love it.
Yeah. There's a comment here from my brother that I think is worth pointing out. Columbus ate my homework is my brother. He says it's also important that Mal's death was her giving up on the kids.
Yes.
And it's because it all comes back to the flaw. Like, how do you tie it all together?
Yeah.
Oh.
That's a good note.
I just have to say again, the most impressive thing about this movie is how much information it gives while keeping things so personal.
Yeah.
Right.
In moment to moment. And so part of that's building on is accomplished through what Avishai has brought up, is that use of specific images, the use of those sort of like threads, those visual threads peppered through the movie, to sort of remind you of like his memories of his trauma, like to keep things. Every scene has like a personal undercurrent, and also just the ticking clocks. Like, because if a movie that's just about external things happening is so boring.
Yeah. Something that this reminds me of is like when your world, like I can't guarantee, but I'm sure I can guarantee that Christopher Nolan had much more information about this world than ever was going to make it into the script. and a lot of it had to take a backseat to what was going to be relevant to the emotional story. And that's hard to do as a writer but it's important to do, to decide that, I only need to reveal the information that is relevant to the emotional core of the story, and the rest of it is just for you to know. Yeah.
I suspect also that his original drafts probably had a lot less exposition. I wonder if he got notes from people saying, I didn't understand this, didn't understand that, and Nolan's like, all right, we will have Ellen Page ask that. And, it sort of struck me, there's a moment in, in the third level of the dream where we're already deep into the heist and they're doing their whole snow skiing gunfight, and Cobb is shooting projections, and Ellen Page then asks, why, are you destroying parts of his brain? And it's like, no, they're just projections. And it's like, okay, somebody asked that. Somebody in the studio asked, are we lobotomizing this man? And it's like, okay, we should probably throw it in there that they're not. And he probably just scribbled into the script. And Alexie, tell me if you've been there where you had a script and you showed it to somebody and they said, I have a question about the world as pertains to this. And in your mind, it's obvious, but you realize it might not come across. And then you have to kind of figure out a way to say it on the page.
It makes me the most like when someone asks you a question, but they pose it like you haven't thought of it yet. And I'm like, no, I do know the answer. I did plan it. I just,
Right. It's just not on the page.
It's just not on the page, but I thought of that. But I mean, it's important for people to ask. It's just like,
it's so hard to have characters reveal exposition that the audience does not know, but the characters do. And it's really, that's like the big blessing of Ariadne in this movie is that you have somebody who does not know. But very often you have to kind of skirt that with, okay, I have a scene with these characters. They both know how this technology works. The audience does not. How do they talk about it without being, as you know?
Yeah. So here's a question from Brian. A lot of critics argue that there is a lack of emotional depth to the characters, that this was one flaw to the film. Thoughts?
I have thoughts.
I think that's not true of Cobb, technically. I think a lot of what he does is based off emotion, but I get that we don't have access to anyone else's emotion in the life, really. And actually, I think this is tied to my biggest problem with the movie is that, okay, you're showing dreams, you're showing subconscious, human beings subconscious, and everybody's dressing like they work in Washington or something and is on a business meeting. There's none of the weirdness of dreams in this movie. I don't know. That's a bigger problem for me. What do you guys think?
And Cobb spend 50 years in unconstructed dream space and can create anything. And they spend 5 decades building square buildings. And they're having a big battle in a dream and subconscious is mobilized and the big threat is they have guns and they need a bigger gun. And I wonder what Nolan's dreams look like, because it's so brutal. It's like, it's pure creation. I'm going to take a building and I'm going to put it there.
Yeah.
I do have thoughts about the characters, though. I feel like Cobb is particularly well developed. I think part of why it doesn't necessarily come across to everybody is because it's all dialogue. He really does talk you through his flaw and his inner need and his want and his problems and what he has to do. It's all in dialogue, which sometimes can sort of detract from emotionally connecting with somebody, because you don't necessarily feel like you are him. You kind of feel like you're being talked to by him, but it is all there. And the other character who's very, as defined as a character gets in this movie is Fisher, because the entire heist is about, convincing him that he likes the movie, but how do we make this corporate product emotional? But it's his problem with his father and having that personal arc. He has an arc that they force him to have. I have a theory, and I was saying this to Adam before we started, that putting aside Nolan's sort of juggernaut, status in the industry, that he can make whatever movie he wants, that he really loves the theatrical experience. Putting that aside, I feel like if Inception is pitched today and not a decade ago, I think it's a TV show, because you do have such a diverse cast of characters who the movie doesn't really touch on for the most part. We know what their functions are, we know what their functions are in the crew and to the plot, but they don't actually seem to exist as people. And I feel like it's sort of perfect fertile ground for a TV show. You have this complex world. You have all of these characters who all, in theory, could be developed and get their own episodes. What do you guys think about that?
I completely agree. I think there's so much potential. But I think, just going on that last point, I don't think the film could have worked if we went into other people's emotional lives too much.
No, not as a film.
So much was going on in the movie. But as a TV show, there's so much potential.
Do you think we have the right amount of characters? Do you think there's too many?
For a movie?
For this story?
I think it works because it's a heist.
Yes.
And you need all those people. But there's not enough women, I will tell you that.
There are 2 women, and one of them exists to be moved on from and to feel guilty about, and the other exists
to correct the man.
to fix Cobb.
Yeah. That's what we're there for,
Yeah, they're not people in the film. They're not people in the film, and that's been that's something that has come up in conversations about Nolan films in general. I feel like also if the movie is a TV show today, even if the movie is made today, I feel like more of the cast are women, and also Ellen Page makes more choices.
Yeah,
it would be a different movie, for sure.
Yeah, it's also a very white core group.
Yeah.
Hey,
which
it's 2010. 2010, baby.
Yeah.
Except for the guy who supplies the drugs.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
But I feel like this film. This is just more of like a cultural, observation. But I feel like this film is kind of has the tone and feel of 2000s action movie all over it. Like there's a slick, the movie, the Hans Zimmer like synthesizers, and like the sleek suits. There's so many visual cues, like lots of skyscrapers, lots of people going to business meeting energy everywhere. Like there are 10,000 movies that feel like this.
It's shot in a really kind of standard way. It's actually kind of funny how like it's sort of known as being this mind-bending film, but aside from the content of it, which has all these different layers to it and all these different concepts, it's shot pretty standard. It's pretty much coverage, right? Like there are some interesting wide shots that look really nifty where we see some cool compositions, but like from scene by scene, like the action scenes are pretty straightforward.
Yeah.
And also very naturalistic, but that's everything Nolan does is like very much like natural light sources, natural presentation. Like the set pieces are all based in reality.
And practical. I love looking at the behind the scenes of this stuff. I shared this post. I shared it on I'll get the link again because it's so cool. It shows the fight scene stabilized next to the fight scene that you saw. I love this stuff. It's
and
not
also
story, but I love it.
Also, I don't know if you guys know about this, but all of the cool visual elements were stolen from the anime film Paprika.
People were talking about Paprika.
Just shameless shit. You should look this up. Like literally Ellen Page wearing a red shirt, and touching the air and it shatters into glass. She wears a red shirt, touches the air. It's like the same shot in the same color story. It's like, and the whole the hotel room sequence that's totally ripped from Paprika.
The hotel room sequence is probably the best action scene that Nolan has done, just by virtue of how clear it is. Because by virtue of just the way that they shot it, you have to stand back. But it is kind of funny. Like I was thinking about this. They talk a lot about dreams, and they get into the concepts of dreams and the psychology of it. The science that they create for this movie, it's the idea of they're intercepting before the brain can create, and then they create something. It really is a lot closer to, say, The Matrix, where it is rigid and adheres to a certain logic and has to kind of fit a sort of standard set of rules that just sort of hijacks the part of your brain that does do dreams, but they have to call it dreams because it's simpler.
But I will say that The Matrix had more of an expressionistic tone, like the green of everything, the warping of reality.
Nolan's Matrix looks very different.
Right. So what are your thoughts on The Matrix? You guys like it? The first one?
I've not seen it.
I've not seen The Matrix.
No.
I love it. I love the first one.
I love it too. Just checking. Because the first half of the movie is really slow, like by modern standards.
At some point, we have to talk about that on the show because I think it's a masterclass on exposition in a very different way than this movie is. Because in this one, the protagonist is explaining the rules to a side character who does not really have an inner life, and in The Matrix, all of the rules are being explained to the protagonist and helping him on his arc. Right. And so somebody was asking in the comments how to define arc, and I think it's probably useful to just rattle that off. Arc is a character has a flaw, and through the course of the choices that they have to make, they overcome that flaw.
And overcome the flaw and satisfy or promise to satisfy their inner need.
Yeah.
Yeah. I also have the opinion that I know you haven't seen it, but I think Matrix Reloaded is underrated.
I haven't seen it in like 10 years.
No, I think it's a bad movie, but I love the plot idea of like the architect stuff. I love that stuff, but everybody makes fun of it. Anyway,
I've realized that most of the films that I haven't seen is because they were rated R, and I was too young, and
there you go,
in Kentucky. So here we are. I cracked the code. I need to watch everything R that came out before I turned 18.
Well, finally, the things you were locked out of, they're now open to you, Alexie.
I know. The possibilities are endless.
Do we have anything else to talk about in Inception? I mean, there's stuff. There's
a lot of stuff. Let's see. Does anybody have any Inception questions?
I have a thought about just sort of the there are certain threads that are left open and certain characters I think do not need to exist. Like, I'm not sure Cobb's father needs to exist.
No, but they wanted Michael Caine.
They wanted Michael Caine, but he
is that why he was? I didn't even get that was his.
That's his father.
Why? That didn't matter.
They wanted.
He calls him dad. He calls him dad.
I wonder if in another draft,
reality, Cobb, come back to reality.
I wonder if in another draft he's the mentor, because he sort of starts being a mentor and then says, "Actually, my student here could be your mentor. I'm going to leave now."
Well, he's the mentor. He's the mentor machine. He goes. He wants to mentor. He shakes it. Gets. He's
the matchmaker with mentors. He supplies you with the mentor. But also the whole thing with Cobalt engineering feels to me like a hat on a hat, because they set it up as Cobb and his team were working for Cobalt to steal from Saito. They failed. Cobb does not tolerate failure, so they're going to kill them. And then they completely forget about this for the rest of the film.
Yeah, I didn't understand. I missed what that was about.
So what it was is Cobalt Engineering hired them to extract information from Saito, and they failed because Saito realized he was within a dream, and they run away, and him and Joseph Gordon-Levitt are on the run. They get confronted on the helicopter because their friend, who was the original bad architect who fucked up with the rug, sold them out. And Saito said, your friend sold you out. What do you want to do with him? Because he kind of was like, I guess it was like a rat's a rat, and I want to punish a rat for trying to be a rat approach. Anyway, and then and he gets carted off.
Cobb saves a cat by not killing him. They cart him off. They say, "What are you going to do to him?" Nothing, but I can't speak for Cobalt Engineering. And then in Mombasa, Cobalt Engineering people try to kill Cobb, and Cobb escapes, and some of the Cobalt people get killed in the process. And then they forget about it, and it kind of feels like they were setting them up to become a surprise obstacle in the third act. Like, oh no,
I would have hated that.
Like the bad idea is, oh no, while they're unconscious, the plane is hijacked by Cobalt and their bodies are in danger. There's definitely a version where they have to wake up on the plane and fight. But it feels, if it's a TV show, it gets a subplot. If it's a TV show, it gets an episode. But it does really feel like it was included with one purpose, which is to add extra pressure to Cobb, saying he can't just lie low and avoid taking jobs, because even if the law can't arrest him in France for murdering his wife, Cobalt is out to get him, so he can't sit still. And I get that impulse, but that Chekhov's gun does not go off.
No.
Well, yeah, it's definitely an unanswered question.
And honestly, I entirely missed that. I thought, God, now I don't know how I missed it, but I really thought that they were just basically auditioning for Saito in that thing, and then they were like, "Oh, wow, you screwed up my rug," and then that's why and then I thought that that's why he picked him up in the car.
That's what I thought the first time I saw it in theaters, that Saito was auditioning him, and it turns out it was all a trap just to see how well he would do. And then we were continuing to. But no, in the film, they very much say, like, look, I showed him in Mombasa to protect my investment, and Ian's getting the car. This is a different tale. Like, I shook that tail. This is a different tale. Like, they create this concept, and then they forget it, which I think is interesting.
Also, I think we need to talk about that Robert Fisher, like, mind is kind of messed up. Like, the whole thing is like the whole arc he has about, oh, my father wanted, but in real life his father was just a piece of shit who died. Like they gave him like a false belief about his reality.
Right. Well, the way they played it was Eames says, I've been paying attention, I got myself in the room where it happens. His godfather is manipulating him, and he doesn't see that he's being manipulated. And his father's a piece of shit, and Robert wants to live up to him. So we have to convince Robert, who wants to live up to his father, that the best way to live up to his father is to stop trying to do that, and also make him aware that his godfather's a piece of shit. And
right,
it's at least it's not lobotomizing, but it's certainly gaslighting to an incredible degree.
Right.
It's not ethical.
It's not ethical, but that's okay. Your characters can be unethical.
But it's framed in a way where it's sort of like, oh, he has this powerful, arc. Like they focus on it that way, but it's really kind of just like giving him a false sense of his life and his relationships.
But from his perspective, it's great.
Yeah, from his perspective, Daddy loves me.
Yeah.
Also,
and he's dead, so he can't prove them wrong now. So maybe that is a good way to close that chapter.
He lives the rest of his life happy.
Veronica asks, is the Godfather bad? Like, in real life, was he? I think he was. It was implied that he was, because he was rude to those people.
Well, Eames says the vultures are circling, and he doesn't know it, and I don't know. That's how it read to me. Yeah. It's worth pointing out, by the way, that they ask Saito, why is it so important to dismantle your competition? And Saito says, well, you see, we can no longer compete, and soon they will have a monopoly and take over the entire world, and we can't let that happen. And Cobb and his team are like, great, works for me. And nobody really questions the fact, and it's kind of great, I'm personally happy about this, but nobody questions the fact that Saito's next line would have been, and therefore I must take over the world. Become a superpower.
Also, we don't even know if that's true. Like, don't listen to the competitor, you know what I mean?
Also, like, Saito is a bad person. Like, he was very willing to let Cobb kill their architect and or leave him for other people to kill him.
But bad is relative, because from a movie viewer point of view, he's honorable.
Right. He's honorable. Like, he's certainly, like, to bring the question of, is likable important? Likable is not important.
No.
You just need to understand them. And we understand Saito. He's not a good person, but you can understand him, and you can talk to him, and you can work things out with him.
It seemed like a reach, though, to make him be like, we have to prevent a monopoly. Like, he could have just said, like, I'm hiring you because my business is going to go out of business.
That's not Hollywood, though. That's not Hollywood enough. Like, it needs to be saving the world,
I wonder whose idea it was. I wonder if it was Nolan's idea to include that justification, if it was the studio's idea because they needed to be good.
I bet you it was his idea.
Really?
Or if it was the actor's idea.
The actor. Oh.
I wonder if from like, as an actor, he's like, I want to justify my actions as an actor. I want to understand my motivations here, and I feel like just wanting power might not be enough for me. It's entirely possible he wants some sort of personal reason to succeed that isn't just business.
I don't know. I have no reason to think this, but I think for all of his strengths, I think there's a little bit of a Hollywood hack living inside Nolan's head. I think he's brilliant. I think he's a really smart writer, really great filmmaker. I love his aesthetic and approach, but like, he's got a little bit of a handball. Like, he loves the big show. He loves the big save the world stakes. You know what I mean?
Well, there's something to be said for, this is a very complicated story with a very complicated world, very complicated concept. It really invites the audience to catch up with it. But Nolan is very smart in understanding that in order to tell a story like this, the story itself has to be incredibly simple, and the characters have to be simple. And I forget who it was who I saw in an interview saying something like this, not about Inception, just in general, the idea that if you have a really complicated plot, then you need a simple story, you need simple character arcs. And if you have a very simple story, the characters have to be incredibly complex.
I agree.
People want to see your puppy, Avi.
She just ran out of the room.
Oh,
What's your puppy's name? What was that?
Matana.
Oh, cute.
And my brother points out she is 10.
10. Wow.
All right. Do we have questions?
Yeah, I'm sure we do.
Yeah.
Second.
Do you guys have things you want to talk about?
I mean, always, this movie's, I also have to think like this movie is talked up to be bigger than it is, like in terms of like how, not bigger, but like it's talked up to be smarter than it is. Like people talk about this movie like they talk about Rick and Morty. They're like, oh, you have to be intelligent to understand it. Well, oh, it's so brilliant. There's nothing as smart. No, it's just a dense, well done thing. But it's still at the end of the day, Rick and Morty is like, a comedy. Like Inception. It's an action movie. It's not necessarily transcending the document.
The trappings are complicated. Complicated, but it's a very straightforward story, as opposed to, I don't know, name an incredibly complex story that might be difficult. Like, I don't know, the Conversation, right?
Right.
It's
John loves that one.
Yeah, it's great.
Yeah, he does.
But that's a story that really kind of gets into the weeds with these characters and ambiguity, and it's a much more, I would say, a much more complex story than Inception. It was just a complex framing for a well-trod story. It is a 3-act heist. It's just a different idea behind it, which I think Nolan does well, and I think it's smart of him to have done that. One thing that I think is worth pointing out also, by the way, is objectivity versus subjectivity. Where in a story, kind of who are we aligned with in the story and the scene with what we're seeing. And I think there's a lot of this movie that's kind of objective. We as the audience are kind of brought in just to sort of watch from the outside as things are happening. But then whenever we're with Cobb and he starts to hallucinate, it becomes subjective.
Right.
When he starts seeing things, or we just have brief snippets of flashback. And that moment where when he's describing his life with Mal for 50 years and we see them as young people, and then at the end he explains actually they were old and then we see them as old people. I think it's a really elementary way to get the audience to enter the perspective of the character, is to show them things as those characters see them. If you have a flashback in a story, it should be connected to a character. Which character is remembering it, right? And that helps us identify more with this character than the other characters who aren't really developed in their own way. But if those characters started having flashbacks, we would be very confused.
Yes.
Yeah. Let's see.
Oh, I have one I want to answer.
What is it? The role of Cobb?
Yeah. If you could recast the role of Cobb, who would you choose? Without question, Nicolas Cage.
No.
Not because it would make the movie good. I just want to see that. I just love his face.
Oh my God.
You know who I would do?
Who?
John Krasinski. No, Daniel Day-Lewis, and here's why.
Oh God.
Why, if you're showing a heist story about a man with regrets that is entirely mental, why does it need to be a young man?
Right.
Why
or a man.
Or a man. Yes.
Yeah.
Daniel Day-Lewis could play a woman.
There we go.
Or just cast a woman. But why do the kids have to be that young necessarily? Or I guess it does add something that they're young because then they don't know their father. But why does the mastermind who's been through this so much have to look like a 20-something?
Right, because they're in a dream, so it's not like they need to be.
Right. Maybe he can't walk in the real world, and in the dream he can walk. Like there are things.
Like the old people, all those old people that the chemist has in his basement.
Yeah, I think if I were Christopher Nolan in an alternate reality in which I am Christopher Nolan and have all the power in the world and can delay movies during a pandemic by increments instead of by years, I would cast Daniel Day-Lewis.
Let's see, Charlize
Theron.
She'd be great. Did I say a name?
She's great.
Scarlett Johansson. That's great.
Oh, ScarJo. She's great. Let's see. Maybe at this point we should talk about what next week is going to be.
What is next week?
Parasite, right?
Parasite. Yes.
Which is one of my favorite films of the last 5 years for sure. When I watched it, the feeling that came over me, because I went in with no expectations. I thought it was a horror film or whatever. I didn't know what it was. Wow. The feeling that came over me was Americans don't know how to direct movies. Like this choice, every choice was a great choice. I was blown away. I don't know if you guys felt the same way, Avishai.
It's really something, and it holds up on rewatch. And also just hardly the main thing about it, but so great at setup and payoff at every tiny thing.
Avishai, I don't want to spoil this for Alexie because she hasn't seen Parasite yet.
Okay.
Right. So I'm really looking forward. I've been trying since
May. It's in here because I need to watch it.
That's really what it's in. Since May, I've been sending texts to her being like, you have to watch Parasite. I'll be disappointed with you in person if you don't watch Parasite by next week. 2 months go by. I'm very disappointed in you. But Avishai, I'm just curious, no spoilers. What did you think of the sort of epilogue ending?
No spoilers?
No spoilers.
I personally think it is one of the greatest things about the film.
Yeah. The light switch thing, like it just...
Okay, don't get into it.
But, sorry.
But I do think, and it's funny because every so often there is a movie that comes out and then there's a conversation about, is that a good ending or a bad ending? And every time, after a few years pass, everybody agrees it's a good ending. Like it happened with, I'm not going to get into spoilers for this one either, but it happened with Ex Machina, where there is one scene at the end. And I remember in film school, people were talking about, was that one scene too many? And I was on the side of, no, it's perfect because it reveals something very important thematically. And some people were like, well, but the plot could have ended right before that, and maybe that was unnecessary. And I'm pretty sure everybody's of a mind now that it drives the point home in a way that it would not have otherwise.
And on this point, Avishai, this is the same thing happened with Return of the King. When Return of the King came out, everyone was complaining, it ended 6 times, there's 6 endings, this is going on forever. Nobody says that anymore.
I think some people still say that.
Okay, well,
I think some people still say that.
But the film, I don't know. I thought the ending was great. And I always want to talk about Lord of the Rings. So,
but there is something to be said about, there's a difference, I think, between an epilogue and an ending.
Yes.
And Return of the King, I think, has an extended epilogue, which I think it earns. But the movies that we're talking about, like Parasite and Ex Machina, those aren't epilogues. Those are endings. Those are the periods on the sentence. That's not an afterword.
I would make the argument that this is subtle. It is subtle, but I do think it's in there. I do think it's in the movie. Frodo's letting go of the trauma of the past. Like even in every one of those endings, they fade away and Frodo is like not there. He's not there. He like touches his shoulder. He's still not able to enjoy the moment. He's there, but it's not the same. It's not until he actually doesn't smile in any of the endings until he gets on the ship and goes to the Grey Havens. He finally smiles.
I'm going to have to take your word for it because I haven't seen it in years.
You should rewatch it.
We should do it for a coffee class at some point. So if you all have movies that you want us to do for coffee class, I'm trying to figure out the best way to collect the list just so we have them. Keep in mind we have to get everything past John, and John really likes the Sunset Boulevard Casablanca.
There's a video on the Lessons from the Screenplay YouTube channel that compares Parasite with Sunset Boulevard.
Oh yeah, that's what someone just mentioned.
Yeah, it's great. Don't watch it until you've seen the movie, Alexie.
Oh man.
I also want to do a Miyazaki film on the channel.
I would so interesting.
But there's no script.
Because I know, but I don't think it really matters. Wait. So I don't know if you know this, Avishai, but they write they animate before they have a script and with no storyboards.
I believe that. I believe that because I feel like Miyazaki has a very innate sense of story, but isn't necessarily consciously thinking about structure.
No.
Like when I watch his films, they work so well, and I would be interesting to talk about them on this show because how do you analyze the script structure of those movies when they're not particularly interested in following the rules?
No.
I think though that I would have to rewatch
Princess Mononoke has pretty established rules.
Well, sure, but
it falls apart though. The ending doesn't work for me, but
like say like Spirited Away,
right?
Like you could, I'm sure if you look at it enough, you can find the structure beneath it all. But I feel like it's kind of superimposing a structure on it, and I feel like it's a lot more organic than that. It would be worth a conversation.
So something quick, something that we do need to figure out is, we're getting a lot of requests for Arrival and Jojo Rabbit and stuff like that, and we need to talk about that internally because I love those films. They're also in our feature course, so I don't want to be redundant. And then someone just asked, will we ever talk about TV or is this strictly film? We're talking about film now because we're doing this feature class. Before we were talking about shorts. We'll probably move on to film or to TV at some point in the near future in like a few months or something.
I want to recommend a podcast if you're interested in learning about TV writing because in school I mostly learned features and have generally spent my time focusing on features. And I listened to this podcast, Children of Tendu, which is Javi Grija, Mark Swatch, and Jose Molina, established TV writers, talking about not just how to write stories for TV, but also what it's like to actually be in a writer's room and what the sort of business structure of it is. And it is so unique and different compared to features. And I think it's totally worth a listen. Children of Tendu. It's Tendu.
Just have to answer a question, which I have to answer. Brian asked, what are my thoughts on the extended cuts? Also, knowing Lord of the Rings is one book and the movies are different from start to finish, how do they follow structure individually? The Lord of the Rings series does not follow structure really at all. Return of the King, the story ends about 2/3 through, and the last third, it just sort of...
Adam,
did we lose him? Oh no, he was talking Lord of the Rings.
And the internet realized it and had to put a stop to it.
Yeah, they said, stop it.
I'm dropping out of the
You
chat.
did.
Anyway,
I know you started talking about Lord of the Rings and the universe said no.
Yeah, the universe said no.
It'd be good to have a class on adaptation, though, because there's something to be said about how do you take something that isn't... Because novels are not films and are not beholden to the same 3-act structure because you can read them for however long you want. But you do it when you turn it into a film, you do have to kind of rework it. And it would be interesting to talk about a film that is adapted from a book that is recognizably the book, but is different.
And that is one of the, if I had to talk about Lord of the Rings in any context, it would be in that, like the screenwriters, that the feat they accomplished with Fellowship of the Ring in particular is so impressive. Like the pacing of the book is crazy. Like, first of all, Gandalf, after he finds out about the ring, leaves for 20 years almost. Frodo is just waiting in the Shire for like a decade, just doing nothing. Like there's so many decisions, and there's so many like little episodic things that don't ever wrap back to the main story. Like making those decisions for especially for something as beloved as Lord of the Rings is.
Adam, have you seen Peter Jackson's early horror movies?
Yeah, I'm a huge fan of Brain Dead or Dead Alive.
Alexie, are you familiar with Brain Dead, aka Dead Alive?
Amazing.
No, of course, I haven't seen anything. If it's horror, even less likely.
Oh, it's so good.
It had the record at one point for the most blood on screen of any film.
Avishai, that I guess gasp for the Lord bit, like the kung fu priest out of nowhere.
Kung fu priest. That reminds me of Warrior Nuns.
It does not feel like the same Peter Jackson who made The Hobbit. I'll tell you that.
But do you know what? Oh, The Hobbit. That goes out of question. But actually, the fact that Peter Jackson's visual vocabulary comes from horror films shows in Lord of the Rings, and I think it's one of the things that really works from a directing point of view. Like all of those wide angles, all of those like the horror pacing really makes the monsters scarier, the tension more real. But just side note on Brain Dead. Oh, what was that?
And his use of practical makeup effects and
100%. But the Brain Dead, the conceit of the film, which is brilliant for those who haven't seen it. It's about this guy who his mother gets contracted with a zombie, and he's like a zombie virus, and she turns into a zombie, and he's like a mama's boy who's trying to like, you know, take care of her and like her every woman life. and basically it becomes rather than keeping zombies out of the house, he's trying to keep all the zombies his mother has infected trapped inside his house in the basement. And it's all his family members and the people in the town. So it's the lawnmower scene.
It gets very big. And H. Spencer points out Sam Raimi with Evil Dead and Spider-Man, and his horrorness shows up in Spider-Man.
Someone's asking about the next pitch week. So we actually haven't. We're trying to figure out what you all thought of that. If that was something that you all thought was helpful, or you know, if that's what you want to do with Coffee Class. So, I need to come up with a way to collect feedback on that.
We can put a poll out in Discord, right?
I have a thought. Tell me what you think about this. Yeah. What if we do something that's like that fellowship that I attended, where what if we kind of get people to sign up to pitch pitch a project of theirs in a very short amount of time. We say thank you, kick them off the video, and then we talk about the pitch, and that person can see us, but we can't see them. And just criticize the pitch in front of everybody in a nice way, but in a helpful way, so that they know this is how they will be talked about when they pitch their story.
Interesting. That's probably very useful.
Oh, right. Because, you were in the room and then they talked about it as though you had left, right?
Yeah. And honestly, it's incredibly helpful. And it would also weed out a certain number of submissions because so many people will not want to do that.
But it's not bullying. It's not like you walk out of the room in like middle school cafeteria. It's like...
it's constructive. It's entirely constructive. But instead of aimed with, we're going to help you make this a better pitch by workshopping the pitch with you, it's more like, here's what worked about the pitch. Here's what didn't work for us about the pitch. Here's what we would have liked to hear. And I think that could be helpful and also give people experience pitching. It would be public because it would be on YouTube. So it would have to be, they'd
have to be fine with sharing their pitches publicly on YouTube. But
ultimately it would be a low stakes thing. Like,
let's talk to John about it. About it.
So if we did do this though, just to clarify with people, you should go ahead and join our Discord so that you can get more information about this. I just sent a link. It's youngscreenwriters.com/Discord. We'll take you there. And then, when we have an application system for submitting, if you want to be a pitch person, then you can. Avi, when you did it, did you pitch the entire movie or was it more like
it was 3 minutes? Hook? 3 minutes. Here is the world, the protagonist, the problem, what the protagonist wants, and what's in their way, and why this is a thematically important story that I want to tell, without getting into necessarily all 3 acts.
Maybe we'll make a video or like some sort of resource with you, and we can make sure that people like have a sense of what that looks like. I'm getting too into developing right now.
Let's take this offline. So guys, thanks for participating. John will be here next week. That'll be good.
Yes.
Yeah. So John will be back, and we are doing Parasite. So hope to see you there and in the Discord. All right. Bye.
See ya.